So my name is Shannon Peel, and I have a company called Market Appeal, because when you have a last name that's a noun and a verb, you use it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Herstory TV and the Herstory podcast. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Wellington, New Zealand, and I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating lady coming to us all the way from Canada this time. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. First of all, I'm so blessed just to meet you and be a part of this. So my name is Shannon Peel, and I have a company called Market Appeal, because when you have a last name that's a noun and a verb, you use it. I live in downtown Vancouver, BC, Canada. Beautiful place, absolutely gorgeous. I am extremely blessed. And as of tomorrow, I will be 48 years old. So, yes, it's been a journey. So, as I was telling you before, I really had to lose everything I was scared to lose in order to find myself. It took a long time for me to hit bottom and to get into that mud pit of life where I was, spending the day at home, and all of a sudden this calmness would come over me, and all the pain I was feeling inside, all that emotional stuff would just disappear. And I'd be like, huh. And I would just be in peace. And then all of a sudden my brain would show me how to kill myself. And it just felt like the right thing to do, because it just made so much sense. Now, thankfully, I'm a Taurus, born in the year of the ox, and that stubborn tenacity got me through that, and got me past those places, as well as my belief in God. Now, before you start thinking, oh, God loves me, blah, blah, blah. No, it was more, I believe in a second life, and the idea of dying and waking up in another place made me even more depressed. So it kept me on this side, thankfully. How did I get from confident, fearless, successful woman that I was to this woman who was a broken image of herself? That's my story. And it starts with a bad decision. And that bad decision was, I tried to buy a business. And it was at the time, when that book, The Secret, came out. And I had this great relationship with God. And I thought, oh, everything was aligning. Like, this business was mine. It was, yeah. And the bank guy at the bank said, oh, yeah, you shouldn't have a problem. This all looks good. Da, da. And I took that as a cue that everything was going to be work out, because all I had to do now was commit, do what The Secret said and commit to this. And I did. And then the bank came back and said, no, we're not going to give you the money. And I didn't have time to figure out a new solution. And I lost $20,000, which, happens. However, my husband at the time took this as an opportunity. And that was my first loss, because I lost my confidence, and he took control of all the finances. I basically came home, gave him my paycheck, and that was it. So that was the beginning of the loss of my power, the loss of my voice. I lost choices. He moved us to Vancouver. I lost my value in the marriage. I lost my value. And then it just went downhill from there. There's a lot of things that happened in between. But one day I finally got this job and everything was going good. And he used his keyword, divorce, to try and get me in line. And this time I said, fine. Yep, I'm not arguing. I'm not changing. Let's go for it. So I lost my marriage, and things got so bad that at one point he was screaming at me. And once again, that whole calmness, I was totally detached from the situation. It was like this veil was between us. And I knew that I was in trouble, that he was going to cross a line he had not crossed before. He had threatened to cross plenty of times, but he had not actually crossed. So I knew I had to leave the house. When that happened, of course, I lost my middle class lifestyle because his idea of paying child support was a fraction of what he was supposed to pay. The children came with me full time, and we went from a 2,700 square foot home to a basement suite and then to a 2-bedroom apartment. I didn't have any money, so I lost my financial security. And I was making ends meet. I mean, I did find, I didn't get introduced to some places I'd never thought I'd ever see, like the food bank line and some social services. And when I met with, like, I live in Canada, so we have a lot of government resources for us, and which is great. And I would go and I would talk to the justice people at Family Justice, and they had lawyers and stuff. And every single one said I was presenting as an abused woman. And I didn't believe them. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not abused. And then they would say, okay, so you're going to fight for child support. I'm like, oh, no, we can't do that. No, we can't upset him. He said he'd pay this much. That's okay. And they're like, yeah, you need to go and deal with that before we can move forward with with fighting for you. So I was just making ends meet. And then I lost my job. That was fun. Single mom, lost my job. And then, government financial backing was disappearing. My government caseworker couldn't understand why I couldn't get a job, because I was going through these month-long interview processes where you start with the phone interview and the next thing you know, you're on the 10th interview. And I was always coming up second or third. And she was like, I don't understand it. So all of a sudden, all that, I felt unemployable. I felt that I had no economic value. And I was scared they were going to come take my kids away because I couldn't afford to put a roof over their head. Then my parents was like, okay, you got to do something. And I tried to give my ex 60% of the house. Like, he finally moved out of the house 2 years later and finally sold the house after 2 years. He was living in at that time with his mom and his girlfriend. And so I said, take 60%, just give me 40% and we're good. But he was, nope, that's not enough. I want 70% and 50-50 with the kids so that I don't have to pay child support. So my mom said, okay, I'm stepping in. And when she finally learned, he showed her true colors to her, his true colors to her. And that was the tipping point for me, because all of a sudden there was a credit card. I had a lawyer, and they were loaning, and then they were willing to loan me money against the money from the house. And the first thing that the lawyer did was send my ex a no contact order, which is kind of like a restraining order in Canada. For the first time, I felt protected. I felt somebody was in my corner. I felt like I wasn't alone. It was like this big, huge weight just fell off me. I mean, the day we were giving him the papers was terrifying. But after that, it was just totally, my life changed around. My parents started loaning me money against the house money. And then I got a job. And then I found a new place where it was 3 bedrooms, and I was able to create a home for my kids. My son even moved kids into my house. Like, I had kids all over the place. It was wonderful. My daughter was there. My son was there. And then one day my son comes up to me. He's like, Mom, I'm moving out. I'm 18. I'm going to move in with my friends who were all living with me. And I'm like, okay. I wasn't happy about it, but in my head, I'm going, okay, he's 18. Everything's okay. So they moved out and moved up the street. And then I lost my job again. And when that happened, the stress came back of not being able to find a job. How am I going to be able to pay for and all that stuff? So I think my daughter at the time was really kind of, okay, I don't want to go through this again. And something happened, and she took off to her brother's house. And the next morning I get a text from my ex-husband. Like, remember, my kids haven't talked to me. I get a text from my ex-husband saying, Kennedy has told me what it's like to live with you. I'm giving them the child support, which the lawyer had fought to finally get for me. I'm giving them the child support, and Kennedy is moving in with Carter. I did not take that well because the one thing I hadn't failed at yet was being a mom. And I was a good mom. And that moment, my daughter didn't talk to me for 4 months because of how angry I got. She never saw me mad before. And then I apologized profusely right afterwards because I'm like, I get it, okay. But it put a strain on our relationship. And that's when I was finally alone. Didn't have a job, didn't have child support. Thankfully, I still had the money from the house. And the government had applied to get into this program for self-employment, and the government accepted. And once they did that, I was going to these classes to learn how to be self-employed, which was really funny because I'd had 3 successful businesses in my past. It wasn't like I didn't know what to do, but you got to jump through hoops to get the support. And once I did that, it's taken me a long time to get back to where I am now. I've run the gamut of issues, but COVID was a blessing for me because COVID here, like we shut down and I was isolated in my 400 square foot apartment in downtown Vancouver by myself. And I had to really take a look at my business, where it was, where I wanted it to go, and my life.
Yeah.
I'd made a lot of bad decisions over those years. And I had to start really looking at the story I was telling myself and look at the story that I needed to tell. And one of the things I had done during that turbulent time of leaving the house and finally getting support was I wrote a novel. And basically the novel is 5 women who are in their 40s, and they are looking at life, how to navigate life in the 21st century. And these 5 women represent the 5 different sides of me. There's the stay-at-home mom who was the perfect mom and the perfect wife and had the perfect life and thought that she just knew what was going on. And yeah, that was me at one point. There was the sister who was the divorce lawyer who was bitter, and just dating. Like it talks about dating and stuff like that too, but she's just bitter. Then there was her friend who was the woman, the party girl who loved men, and it was all about fun. And then there was the woman who was abused, and she would just come out of her marriage, and she was a broken person. And then the last one was the woman that looked like she had it all. She had she had a stay-at-home job, business that was really successful. She had perfect kids, the perfect husband that every woman wanted. And yet she was depressed because she couldn't understand why. It just didn't feel like there was something missing in her life. So it really looks at life from these women's point of view. And now what I'm doing is I'm taking that, because each chapter is really a blog post written by one of the women. And I'm breaking it apart and creating a series to help women figure out their story and heal through story. It's about, you get the bit of the novel. There's, I talk a little bit about the topic that's in the novel. And then there's questions to journal about, to really look at your opinions, your values. How did it affect, were you affected by that in your life? Do you know anyone that was affected by that in their life? And really looking at the language that we use when we tell ourselves stories.
Yeah. And
the language that we use when we're helping people who are in those places. Because unfortunately, I had to walk away from a lot of people because their good intentions just made things worse. So that's why COVID.
Wow. You have a fascinating story with just so many layers to it. Mm-hmm. I want to take you back a little bit. If you could have a conversation with the younger you, mm-hmm. that young woman who had lost her home, lost her husband, is in a crisis right in the beginning.
So not that far back.
Let's go far back. Based on what life has taught you to get to this point, What 3 nuggets of wisdom would you give her?
You matter. You matter. Your parents do love you no matter what. And it's okay to fail. It's not the end of the world.
Mhm. And now you are using and harnessing all of this pain, all of this strength to help other women who are going through something similar. And that's really quite fascinating for me. If you were to go into your future
Mm-hmm.
at the age of 100 and you're sitting in your rocking chair surrounded by your grandchildren, and you could have a conversation with the future you based on how you're living your life, what would you say to her?
You're living your life for you, not for your parents, not for your husband, not for your kids, not for the people in the world that say you should have 2.45 kids and live in the suburbs, and you've lived a life that you were supposed to live. You've lived the best life that you can live. Perception of what life should be.
That's awesome. And now through this book that you've written, it's interesting that it represents all of the facets of who you are. And you've
Mm-hmm.
really managed to break it down and touch on all of those parts of yourself. How can people get access to this? Are you coaching? Are you mentoring? What are you doing with this material?
Well, it is on my website, marketappeal.agency, not .com. That's a whole other thing. I got to buy that, I know. But it's marketappeal.agency. And if you go into the store, there's the books, and you can download the first book and read it. There is a membership piece if you want to become a Story Appeal member. Then you get the whole journaling and all the pieces that help you, plus challenges and access to forums and stuff like that, just about how to tell your story, how to tell your story in a compelling way that will enable you to get help, and how to have a voice. That was one of the major things that I learned, because I allowed people to say hurtful things to me.
Mm.
I allowed knee-jerk reactions to affect my self-value because I didn't have the voice and the words to say, look, that actually hurts me when you say that.
Mm. A lot of times too, you're caught off guard, and in the moment you don't know how to react or respond.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't know how to go back to it to address it. So what would you recommend somebody do in a situation like that?
Well, when you know your story, and a lot of times that these people, when they say stuff to you, these are people that are close to you that don't say it once. They say things over and over and over again. So it's about understanding how you are processing what they're saying, and then understanding where they're coming from. You know, a lot of the things that you said were based out of fear, were based out of not seeing me as an individual. And then able to rewrite the story so that the next time they say something, you're able to say, hey, look, I understand that you love me and that you're scared for me. However, when you say this, I feel this, or I think you're saying this. Then they come back and they go, that isn't what I intended. And it's like, your intent doesn't matter. What matters is my interpretation.
Yeah.
Because you're not communicating properly. And then you
learn and it's interesting that it is the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah. Don't tell my mom I admitted that, because she kept on saying, you're telling the story wrong. You're telling the story wrong. You shouldn't say you got kicked out of the house. I'm like, well, that is the fact. He kicked me out of my house. And yes, that is a fact. But in the end, I chose to leave because it was I can either say I got kicked out of the house, or I chose to leave because it was an unsafe situation.
Yeah.
Which one sounds more empowering? And my mom kept on telling me that I needed to say that. I'm like,
no. Sounds to me like you've got a wise mother by your side.
Right. Moms are right, damn it. When you don't want them to be.
Oh, Shannon, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And thank you to everybody who has tuned in. It's just been amazing the number of women I've been meeting through these interviews, the layers and layers of stories. And you're so right. We do heal as well when we share the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that you're encouraging people to journal, because sometimes you just have to get those crazy voices out of your head and put them on paper.
Writing and writing the novel. And I write a lot, like on my blog, I write a lot about emotions, like what is fear, emotions and professionalism. You know, like when your boss says something to you and you want to, like, how do you process that? What's allowed? What's not allowed? What is fear? What is hope? And so I write those because I'm struggling with those things myself.
Yes.
So journaling
Yeah.
really does help you understand what is really going on in your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause
Thank you, Sharon. It is all in your head. Have a
lies.
fantastic day, everybody. This is Gertrude in Wellington. I will see you again tomorrow. Have a great day wherever you are in the world. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you very much.